Well, everybody, good evening to our viewers in the United Kingdom. Good afternoon for the viewers in the Raleigh-Durham area, and good morning to the people in Hawaii. This is Pod TV show on medicine and science. I'm Nick Palavita. I'm going to be the director of the show, but not the host. And today we're going to look at the top five vaccines you must know about. Now, it's very interesting because I thought everybody took vaccines because they work. And then I found out there's a whole group of people that don't want to take vaccines, even though they do work. A very interesting factoid is that prior to vaccines, the average life expectancy in the world was like age 36. And you can even go to the Bermuda. When I used to go there, I looked at the tombstones. People lived there till age 26, and that was it. And then vaccines came along, especially the smallpox vaccine, started mitigating what was deaths. But there was more than that. Yet at the same time, people go, oh, well, we shouldn't take vaccines because what? You don't want to live to beyond age 36? Well, with that, we're going to bring in a medical doctor, board certified in internal medicine, who's going to discuss the top five vaccines that you must know about. Let's bring in Dr. Michael Patmos. Dr. Michael comes to the stage.
Good morning, Nick, and good morning to all your viewers. And I'm here in Hawaii, and a little shout out to the people of Lahaina and what they've had to endure. As everybody knows, the whole town was burned down in August. Anyhow, I am excited about this topic because I'm an internal medicine doctor, but I also have added qualifications and added training in infection control and hospital epidemiology, and been very passionate about the vaccines all my life because I was one of the first kids in the country to get polio vaccine. And I remember the pre-vaccine era. So to talk about, my my top five vaccines, the vaccines everybody should know about, I just want to set the stage. And the stage reflects what your opening comment was. And that is that vaccination, immunization as a strategy, a public health strategy, is the single most effective public health strategy in the history of humanity. No other intervention, public health intervention, has saved more lives and avoided more misery than vaccination. And the history of vaccination really started around the disease smallpox. For those who don't know about smallpox, it's a disease that doesn't exist anymore because of vaccination. It's a viral disease that it was the scourge of humanity since the beginning of time. Millions upon millions of people died from smallpox over centuries. It was a very disfiguring disease, left you scarred for life. It was an awful scourge on humanity. And so it was the first target for vaccination. And efforts were made to develop a vaccine for smallpox going back into the 1800s. And we developed a vaccine for it. And what was great was there really wasn't much opposition to vaccination back then. And the World Health Organization and the United Nations actually achieved something that was thought to be an astronomical goal. They basically essentially immunized virtually everyone on the planet. They went into jungles and vaccinated indigenous peoples, and it was a worldwide effort to vaccinate virtually the entire Earth population. And by doing so, we eliminated the disease. It doesn't exist anymore because that virus only lived in humans. So if you vaccinate everybody, you can eliminate the disease, and that no other disease has been eliminated from the face of the earth. There were other diseases we came close to doing that, polio and measles, for example, but we're backtracking now because of the anti-vax movement. So having said that, let's go into the five vaccines. You don't need to get smallpox vaccination anymore because it's a disease of antiquity. It doesn't exist anymore. The only disease ever to be eradicated from the face of the earth. Smallpox. But we have five vaccines we want to talk about today that people should know about for diseases that are active today. And my top five are, starting at the bottom, number 5, the meningococcal vaccine. Now, why is the meningococcal vaccine important and who gets it? Well, it's a vaccine that's given to college kids when they go into the dormitories. It's required to go to college. It's also given in military recruits, for people in basic training. It's for when people live in close, crowded situations. Meningococcal disease can be very rapidly spread. And in fact, this vaccine was developed by one of my mentors, Dr. Michael Apicella, who's an infectious disease doctor. He wrote the chapter on meningococcal disease in Harrison's textbook of internal medicine. Anyhow, why is the meningococcal vaccine so important? Because meningococcus can kill you fast. It's a disease, it's an infectious disease caused by a bacteria. It's contagious. You can go from being a perfectly healthy 19-year-old college student athlete on Tuesday morning and be dead of meningococcemia on Wednesday morning. It can kill you that fast. Once the disease gets going, it's really hard to stop. So early diagnosis is crucial, but that's not pneumococcal, it's meningococcal. It's related to the pneumococcus, but it's different. It's it's Neisseria meningitidis, and then the meningococcus. Anyhow, this is a disease that's highly contagious and very, very deadly, very rapidly. That's why a vaccine is so important, and that's why you're required to have it when you go to college and you live in a dorm. So that's vaccine, my favorite vaccine, number 5. Shout out to the great Dr. Michael Apicella, who invented it. The second, number 4 on my list, is the tetanus vaccine, which is part of the DPT, diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus. Why is tetanus vaccine so important? Well, similar to meningococcus, tetanus is an infection that can take a perfectly healthy person and kill you in a day. If a tetanus infection is caused by a bacteria called Clostridium tetani. So if you get a cut or a wound or a scrape, step on a rusty nail is the old adage we always think of, but it can be from any wound that gets contaminated with bacteria that are found in soil. Clostridium tetani, that bacteria, is normally found in soil. So if you get dirt in a wound, you can get Clostridium tetani infection, which will grow. And you get an infected wound. Well, that bacteria, Clostridium tetani, produces a toxin called tetanus toxin. That toxin is really an interesting toxin. It binds irreversibly to the neuromuscular junction, and it paralyzes you. You get what's called tetany or tetanus, where you just lock up, lockjaw. Everything just locks up. You can't breathe and you die. It's irreversible. Once you get tetany, there's nothing you can do. It's irreversible. I know of a case when I was a young doctor in Nevada of a child who got tetanus, hadn't been immunized, and died within a day of tetanus. So favorite vaccine number 4, tetanus, because you can die of tetanus very quickly. Now, the tetanus vaccine is given together in a series called DPT for diphtheria, and pertussis. Pertussis is very contagious. Whooping cough gives you this hideous cough. If you've ever seen a case of, you've never seen anybody cough like this. It's a cough that you want to die from the cough. And then, of course, diphtheria, known as the strangling angel of death. It's a very bad pharyngitis. You actually choke to death. And it's rampant right now in certain parts of the world, but not in the United States because of the DPT vaccine. Vaccine number 3 on the all-time, parade of hits of vaccines, the polio vaccine. One of my favorites because I remember before we had polio vaccine, my mother was terrified, as all mothers were back in the early 50s, that their children would get polio and be paralyzed or die and have to spend their life living in an iron lung. In fact, the longest survivor in an iron lung just passed away the other day. He'd lived his entire life in an iron lung because of polio. Well, the polio vaccine basically eradicated polio from the United States until just recently. Now it's coming back because people are not getting polio vaccines because of the anti-vax movement. Number 2, there's another story about polio. There's a religious group in Pennsylvania. I forget which, I don't know if it's the Amish or the Quakers, but back in the 80s, they were not vaccinating their children. And in one summer, nearly the entire population of kids in that religious community got polio. They now vaccinate their kids. Number 2, measles, mumps, and rubella, the MMR, the one that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. got famous for, raised a lot of money. campaigning against the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine is very important because measles is a really bad disease. And we had eradicated measles from the United States. It was declared gone in 1999 or 2000. And well, now it's back because of a lack of immunization. But the measles vaccine is great, highly effective vaccine. It prevents death in 97, 98% of people who take the vaccine. So that makes it a great vaccine. When you see 97, 98% effectiveness. Of course, there's 1 or 2% failure rate, but 98% is an awesome result. And then, so those are we've got number 5, meningococcus, number 4, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis, number 3, polio, number 2, MMR. Who's number 1? What's the number 1 favorite vaccine on the list? Well, I have to tell you, it's a vaccine that a technology that is considered one of the top 5 most important recent stories in medicine. I just took a course at Harvard Medical School a couple of months ago on what's new in internal medicine, and the course director, who's a giant of medicine at Harvard, professor, talked about the 5 major trends, and they're artificial intelligence and gut microbiome, and a few others as well. Top 5. Number 1, messenger RNA technology. It's the messenger RNA vaccine that won the Nobel Prize. Dr. Carrico and Dr. Weissman, who developed the messenger RNA-based vaccine, won the Nobel Prize. That technology is considered at Harvard to be one of the top 5 stories of the past year in medicine. And why is messenger RNA so exciting, and why is it number 1? It's number 1 because it's a novel technique. Over the history of immunization, we've gone from very crude immunizations that, like, they used against smallpox early on by just taking secretions from cowpox and injecting it. And we've become much more specialized and focused on a molecular level. The messenger RNA vaccine is the cleanest vaccine by far, and it really is based upon the idea that we can introduce into the body, utilizing messenger RNA, proteins that will be produced, and then the body will develop an immune response to it. And so messenger RNA-based COVID vaccines have been very effective. They are about 90% effective at preventing death, which, by the way, is the primary purpose of a vaccine, is to prevent death. Secondary purpose is to prevent severe disease. The tertiary goal is to prevent any disease at all, but preventing an asymptomatic infection is not the highest priority. Preventing death is why we vaccinate. So the mRNA vaccine for COVID was great. It's estimated 2 to 3 million lives saved because of just in the United States, saved because of the mRNA vaccine. Around the world, it's estimated about 20 million lives have been saved because of the messenger RNA COVID vaccine. It's very safe. The risk of side effects is very rare, on order of about 70 to 100 significant side effects per 70 million doses. So you're talking about a very tiny percentage of significant adverse events. The future of messenger RNA is very exciting. Already, right now, there are multiple trials going on of messenger RNA-based vaccines for other infections, as well as cancer. The reason why Harvard called messenger RNA technology one of the top 5 stories is not because of its role in COVID or even in infections. It's because of the promise that it has to be able to introduce enzymes and proteins into people who have deficiencies, like genetic deficiencies. Just today, a report was published. It was noted today on social media by Dr. Eric Topol, who's a very highly respected academic physician, of a rare mitochondrial disease that was cured by messenger RNA-based technology. Now, it's a small study. It's early. There's going to be more work that needs to be done on it. But it's the promise of messenger RNA technology in its role in treating rare diseases and complicated diseases where there's a genetic deficiency which we can correct, and also in cancer. I am 72. I hope I live long enough to see the day, but I can tell you that we are looking at a very exciting future for messenger RNA. 10, 20 years from now, the messenger RNA vaccines may be our primary treatment and prevention for cancer. I think that in the future, everyone will be benefiting from messenger RNA-based technology. We're already seeing messenger RNA-based vaccines used in studies in melanoma and other highly untreatable, poorly treated cancers that don't respond well. I think the future of messenger RNA as a cancer treatment, cancer prevention, is really what's so exciting about it. And that's why Dr. Carrico and Dr. Weissman got the Nobel Prize for developing it. The Nobel Prize is the highest award in all of science and medicine. It's kind of like the award that Einstein got, which he did get a Nobel Prize, and Tesla and others got the Nobel Prize. And so it's a giant of an award, and you win the Nobel Prize and you go down in history as one of the giants of medicine. The people who developed the messenger RNA vaccine, Dr. Carrico and Dr. Weissman, got the Nobel Prize for that reason. They are the most responsible for the development of that vaccine. And what messenger RNA promises in the future is very, very exciting. So there you have it, my top 5 cavalcade of hits on the top 5 vaccines. And I'm happy to talk more about them.
Yeah, I mean, what I like to do is also talk about vaccines in general. I mean, from my limited understanding from vaccines is that you inject like dead diseases into your body or things that aren't, and your body develops antibodies that, so if you did catch something, you have a lot of antibodies that keeps you from dying. Basically, you might get sick, but you're dying. It comes from the Greek word vacca, because cows, because the first thing was cows and smallpox, which smallpox basically wiped out most of the Native Americans because they had no resistance to the diseases.
So the concept of a vaccine is you take a fragment, a piece, a part of an activated, non-infectious piece of a virus or a bacteria, or a virus that's been damaged, and so that it's inactivated and it's not capable of causing the disease. So you use this little bit of the germ and you introduce it, and your body thinks it's the thing. It thinks it's infected. So it produces an immune response. Now you're prepared for if you get the actual infection. So people who are like the anti-COVID vaccine people don't recognize you're going to get the COVID, you're going to get SARS-CoV-2 one way or another. Everybody is highly contagious. Everyone on the planet is going to get COVID. Either you get your SARS-CoV-2 by getting infected with the entire virus, or you get a little tiny piece of it and you produce an immune response. Either way, you're going to get it. The question is, which one's worse? Getting a little tiny piece of the virus with a tiny risk of an adverse event, or getting that virus that has a 1% chance of killing you, or a higher percent of making you really sick and landing you in the hospital on a ventilator for 6 weeks, and then being left with long COVID. So yes, that's how vaccines work. It's a little itty bit of a germ introduced into the body that produces an immune response to give you protection from serious disease and death.
Okay, so it's simple, it works. And so why is it that, I mean, like I said, Dr. Patmos, the studies I look at, the infant mortality was, prior to vaccines, 40%. In other words, if you had to have 2 kids because one would die of these childhood diseases that we talk about right now, but we have vaccines for them. So when people say, well, I don't want to get vaccinated, what's the arguments for not getting vaccinated? When for me, I'm going like, it's like saying, okay, I'd rather play the lottery and increase my chances of dying before age 36 to 50%. So why would you do that?
All right, so I liken this to the same thing that happened in the Middle Ages. These people have these anti-vaxxers have a medieval, Middle Ages, antediluvian mentality. Their view of the world is 1500s. And so this goes back to Copernicus and Galileo, when they proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system, that the Earth revolves around the sun, they were expelled from the Catholic Church. They were banned from teaching this. They weren't excommunicated or burned at the stake, but it was like heresy. And, we had in the Middle Ages people being burned, as witches. So this is the same kind of mindset. These people have this non-scientific view that there's something horrible about vaccines, and it's tied in with religious fundamentalism as well. But what's made it worse today, and there's always been this undercurrent of anti-vaxxery, but it's limited. It was a fringe thing, just a tiny population. It's become a big deal today because of fake experts on cable news with fake fraudulent CVs claiming all kinds of things. And then those fake experts are now political tools being used by a political party to try to manipulate fearful population to vote based on fear of vaccines. So I liken this a lot to what happened in the 1500s with Copernicus and Galileo. We're dealing with people who have a 15th century mentality.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was over there in Europe, and one of the big problems they had, of course, was the plague that took place around 1348, and it just wiped out like 40% of the population. It's not
Exactly.
unusual to have that, and and we look over here. There was smallpox that wiped out. It wasn't like the Americans destroyed the Native Americans. They had no resistance to smallpox. So when it comes to vaccinations, to me, it makes sense. And from what I've seen, we have a lot of history. So when you're looking at the measles vaccine and you're looking at the polio vaccine, you're looking at the smallpox vaccine. By the way, I didn't know you stopped getting smallpox vaccines. I had mine years ago, so that's news to me. I was going, really? You don't have to take the smallpox vaccine? But all of them were designed to eradicate or minimize the impact of these diseases on you. And it seemed to me to be well-established science. How do you change well-established science to all of a sudden voodoo science, and somebody jumps up and say, oh, we shouldn't take the measles vaccine anymore because, tell me why.
Well, there's a lot of debate around this on how to deal with vaccine hesitancy. And, it's being, pounding these folks with the facts. It just doesn't seem to work. It just it deepens their resistance. It's part of the conspiracy theory mindset that the government is doing this, and we've got politicians pushing this. I have my own personal belief that combating vaccine hesitancy, we've got to take down the doctors who are giving out false information. And that's something we have not done. There's been little or no effort to hold doctors accountable who provide wrong information. And because the medical boards, licensing boards are reluctant to go after them because it's a freedom of speech issue, a constitutional issue, First Amendment. A doctor has the right to say whatever they want. But do they really? If you're a licensed physician and you have a large audience and you can influence people in the wrong direction by giving incorrect information, I think the way to attack vaccine hesitancy is to take down the fake experts who are promoting false information. The medical boards need to deal with disinformation, and they've been reluctant to do it. There's only been a handful of cases of doctors where medical boards have actually had the courage to hold them accountable. Most medical boards are looking the other way. We'll never defeat vaccine hesitancy as long as we allow fake doctors with fraudulent resumes to give false information on cable news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when we go to polio, this was something that I also thought was well established because I had my polio vaccine years ago. Everybody took polio vaccines. Now, since I've talked to you, I didn't know there was anti-polio vaccine literature even out there, because I've known some people that had polio, and they basically, well, they didn't die, but they have no use of their limbs. And FDR even had polio. He was like a poster child. We even had the March of Dimes with all these people that had polio. So why would anyone not, unless you have some really adverse reaction to vaccination. There's some people out, anecdotal evidence where people do. Why wouldn't you take a polio vaccine? This is like, to me, it's incredible. And why would somebody put literature out that this is bad for you when polio is like a zillion times worse? Tell me why they do this.
Well, first of all, there's money to be made in misinformation and vaccine misinformation. It's all wrapped up into the alternative healthcare industry. So there's a lot of money to be made there. Doctors who jump on this bandwagon are making a fortune. You can sell remedies, people who are fearful of vaccines. So it's lucrative. It's also a political issue now. The GOP has aligned with the anti-vax movement. They're using it as a political strategy. It's a core piece of the political strategy for the GOP. It's even at the CPAC meetings the last couple of years, they had a prominent place for anti-vax doctors at CPAC. So this is a political strategy. It's also a money-making opportunity for these folks, and it's a religion for some people. It's kind of a philosophy. They just, if they're fearful of the heliocentric model of the solar system, they're fearful of vaccination, and it's an anti-scientific mindset.
Okay, talk to me about the pneumococcal vaccination. You kind of got me on that one. Okay. What is it? What does it prevent? I may have taken it, but I was going like, whoa, yeah. I don't know very little about it. So
there's a bunch of so pneumococcus is a bacteria called Streptococcus pneumoniae. It's a round bacteria. It's related to Neisseria meningitidis, the first one I talked about, meningococcal meningitis. Pneumococcus is a really common cause of community-acquired pneumonia, particularly in elderly people. And it gives you a lobar pneumonia. Part of your lung gets just socked in with pus, and it can be fatal. Well, and any doctor, has probably treated pneumococcal pneumonia hundreds of times. It's a very common form. Probably the most common cause of community-acquired pneumonia is the pneumococcus, and it's preventable. There is a pneumococcal vaccine now. Most people who go to their doctors will get influenza immunization and pneumococcal immunization. So we have a pretty high rate of immunization for pneumococcus. Okay. It prevents pneumonia.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, what happened to me just personally, once I turned I think it was around age 35 or something like that. I used to never get the flu when I was younger. Then when I started, I got really sick. I mean, and after that, flu vaccine all the way, never had a problem. And I'm going like, So that's just my own personal experience. So why do people, like I said, what's this big resistance? Are they scared of needles? I don't like having needles put in me, but I just don't like getting really sick and dying. I just don't see that to be good. So why is there such resistance?
They're being bombarded with incorrect information from the anti-vax movement. There are a number of organizations that are really good at presenting false and misleading information. They will take, for example, there's one organization that will do the following. They'll take a vaccine that's, say, 60% effective, which is pretty good, better than half of people who benefit. But they'll focus on the percentage that don't benefit. And they'll say, did you know that vaccine may not help you? Well, nothing in medicine is 100%.
Right.
So focus on the minority that don't respond and ignore the majority that do. That's misleading. And that's what they do. They twist the truth to present it in a way to be discouraging. And their agenda is driven by politics and money and a bizarre philosophy. But people are getting bombarded with wrong information, and we're powerless to stop it. And I think at some point we've got to recognize that misinformation kills people, and we have to do something to protect people from misinformation. This sounds like censorship, but I think we do need to, at some point, the freedom of speech becomes deadly.
Yeah, they do that in securities because I do a lot of counseling for people. You cannot lie and misrepresent on securities offerings. In law practice, you can't bombast the courts, or you actually get disbarred. So, what shocked me is also that the medical profession doesn't have the same scrutiny as the legal profession, the securities profession does. And I figured that someday they're going to change that. For the people listening, just remember this show is for educational only. So please contact your own physician for your medical advice. We're here to provide education, but we're not giving medical advice to individuals. And I did notice one group actually did have their little disclaimer tiny at the bottom. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But we do that also verbally in case you're listening to us from iHeart Radio, and we're also on Spotify. So that's the reason I do it verbally as well as run the tape underneath Dr. Patmos, so everybody knows. But we want to thank our Dr. Patmos for giving us, boy, what a great education. I was going like, every time I come in here, I learn something. I go, pneumococcal virus. All right, I don't want any of this stuff. Anyway, thank you for showing up, and thank you for giving people good advice on vaccination, not just in the United States, but around the world. For our listeners in the United Kingdom and Brazil, something that's very important. Go look and make sure you get vaccinated. In the meantime, we'll see you next week on Medicine and Science. Take care. Bye-bye.